All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about today is franchise frustration. So when people are looking to buy a franchise, there's a bunch of typical things that come up that people get frustrated with. You buy a restaurant franchise. There's an example. There's an extremely long setup time. You may have to build a building. You may have to get special equipment inside. There's all kinds of long lead time items to order, fridges, stoves, and so on and so forth. But there's a lot of setup time. Another thing that frustrates people when they're looking for a franchise is high royalty fees. So that when you're buying a franchise, having a royalty is icing off the cake, we'll call it. And at GoliathTech, we actually don't have royalties, which kind of big positive. We'll talk about that at the end. Another thing people get very frustrated with are extremely rigid brand guidelines. I mean, obviously GoliathTech has very strong branding and it's an important thing to us, but our guidelines, leave you the ability to breathe. We're not choking people with restrictions in the same way. Another issue is lack of opportunity. Many people want to buy a franchise. A great example, again, I'll use the restaurant, is there's only so many chairs in a restaurant, so you cycle that restaurant 3 times. Well, that's the maximum you can sell. In the GoliathTech opportunity, there literally is no lack of no cap to what can be made. So you can do street signs, you can do manufactured homes, you can do. I mean, there's an eternity of possibilities. So within a very small territory, you can actually even get into very large numbers of sales. Another issue people face is large startup costs. The GoliathTech franchise is actually very inexpensive to get into business. We'll talk about that at the end as well. But as a general, rule, getting into a business can be very costly, especially a larger franchise where you're spending, $1 million to invest in a given franchise. We don't have that issue. One of the other things that could be troublesome is training required. If in a typical franchise, like you're starting a hotel, obviously it's a masses of training. You're starting a restaurant or something. There's many hours of training. In the GoliathTech system, we have a very solid training program, but you don't have to go through months and months of work before you can open your doors. We basically do a week of training with you, and the next week you're operational. It doesn't mean that after your week, your training's done and we leave you out there. The training is ongoing. It lasts 6 months, even a year. You'll still be going through the learning process, but you're operational right away. Whereas with many other franchises, the training period is so long, but you're not making any money during that period. Whereas with GoliathTech, it starts right away. The revenues will start right away.
So we've talked so far about the actual business itself of GoliathTech, but let's talk a little bit about what you'll actually be doing. As a business owner, because it will be literally your own business, you will be installing helical piles. So what is a helical pile? A helical pile is literally a large screw we install in the ground to use as a foundation for your deck, as Julian said, a manufactured home, an electric car charging station, et cetera, et cetera. And the way it's installed is we install it with our calibrated installation equipment. So as we install that helical pile in the ground, or as we screw it into the ground, with the information given to us from our calibration equipment, we know exactly how much that helical pile can support. So there's a number of ways of how the helical pile has revolutionized the construction industry, but probably the most important is the speed and the efficiency of the installation. There's no lengthy curing time for concrete. We go in, we install the helical pile with our relatively small installation equipment. For instance, with about a 5,000-pound excavator, you can install a pile that can support 30,000 pounds per pile. So the speed and the efficiency of the installation has no comparison to concrete. So we can go in with our mini machine, install a helical pile, install it and depends on the length we have to go, and we'll get into more of that as you come on board. But how it depends on how deep you have to go. We can install a helical pile in more or less 10 minutes, and there's no curing time. It's ready to build on immediately.
All right. So in the construction industry, is an ever growing industry. It's even when economies go well, when economies go poorly, there's always a requirement for rebuilding infrastructures, whether it's a simple, my patio in my backyard needs reconstruction, or it could be, roads and buildings and so on and so forth. But the construction industry is not a shrinking industry. It's an ever growing industry. So people like recently with the economy going a little tougher, people have been saying, well, what's going to happen and so on and so forth. But, the opportunities for construction never end. So even in a downturning market, our franchisees still grow. So it's a why is a helical pile business good for me? I'm not a contractor, as an example. We're looking for people that have business savvy, the ability and the possibility to get out there and build a business. You don't have to be a general contractor. You don't have to be someone that was in the construction industry before. The base of this business is a sales business. You get out there and you're selling to individuals, companies, contractors, and so on and so forth that are looking for installation. You will be managing crews and so on and so forth. But the crew management part is not necessarily the core of the business. The core of the business comes from, the sales aspect and how do you build it as an entrepreneur, as opposed to, holding a hammer and a nail. So, superior franchise benefits. So why choose GoliathTech? Very important. There's no profit limit, as I was mentioning before. There's sort of no cap to how much you can sell. So obviously, there's no cap to how much you can make. We do not have royalty fees. Almost every franchise has a royalty fee usually. We're a product-based franchise, so we make our money when we sell products, but we don't take money off your profits. So you don't have to report your sales and pay revenues to us based on your sales. So non-royalty model. We go through the rigorous training, as we talked about earlier. The setup time is very, very quick. We've had people call in and say, I'm inquiring about your franchise, and 3 weeks later they're putting piles in the ground. That's fast. Most people would take 2-3 months, as going through the entire process. But from a setup point of view, we're never going to be the bottleneck. We'll go as fast as you want to go. Very important when you're buying a franchise, people do that because they want access to a framework. They want to have engineering support. They want to have marketing support. They want to have that market pull towards them to get work. They want to have the customer service. They want to have the production facility, that we have that supports the chain and so on and so forth. Accounting, there's many different departments, obviously, that you would require as far as support goes. Step one, getting to know each other. So how do you sort of evaluate this opportunity? Step one, you'll get in touch with one of our franchise representatives who basically will take you through, the generalities of what it is to run a franchise. You will then go through that. You sign a contract. We open our doors. Next step, we get to know each other. You get to know the team and so on and so forth. We go through the training. We start to develop your current territory, and often many franchisees will later purchase additional territories because they're starting to grow or maximize their given territory, let's say. And then, of course, there's ongoing support and marketing on the job.
Maybe you should just explain briefly how the territories actually work.
Sure. Yeah, the territories, very simple. A franchise territory is around approximately 250,000 homes minus high rises. So 250,000 addresses, minus high rises. So when you buy a franchise, you'll have that much, physical customers to deal with. And then people, what they'll do is they'll add territories. They'll say, okay, well, I've done pretty good here, and A, I've maximized this, or B, I want to sort of block out the area that I'll buy in the future. So it's We have some franchisees who have 20 territories. We have some who do very, very well in just one or two. So it depends on your style and what you're looking. Speaking of,
Yeah. So success stories. And like Julian said, we are not necessarily looking for contractors. I mean, if you do have experience, for instance, operating a machine, and you already do have contacts with contractors or an engineering firm, geotechnical firm, that sort of thing, it certainly is an advantage. But from our three franchisees on the screen, Lisa and Max, for instance, had a lot of experience. They had been in the industry before. They had a lot of contacts. Darcy, for instance, her and her husband Ryan, she was a school teacher rather, and he was an electrical engineer. So they had literally no contacts in the industry. But it's all about the individual and the drive they have to succeed with their own business. So we never discourage anyone from coming on board, but just remember, sometimes the learning curve will be just a little steeper when it comes to operating the machine, even as something as simple as it would seem to unloading the excavator from the trailer, for instance. But again, Darcy and Ryan are a prime example that experience does not necessarily lead to success. It's all about the person.
All right. So what are the steps to ownership? First is the initial contact. You meet one of our reps. There's getting to know what we're about and so on and so forth. What is it that GoliathTech does, and what is our raison d'etre? After that, it's looking at the numbers. What's the math behind the business I'm about to get into? It's very important then to spend some time talking with some of the franchisees so that you can see what other people did. What was the curve? How long did it take before they started to make money, before it all got profitable, and so on and so forth. After that, we'll sign an agreement, which is the franchise agreement, where we go back and forth. We formalize an engagement. Then you would come and actually meet our team at the same time, typically as you're doing your training and certification. You get to meet production people, you get to meet the customer service people, the engineering, all the different departments, accounting, and so on and so forth. So you can, sort of get a visual of how you're going to interact with head office. Then you launch your business. You've gone through your training, you've signed your agreements, and you're ready to start putting piles in the ground. Certification. So GoliathTech has a lot of certifications. Actually, we put 10 of them up on the screen here. 10 of the more important ones. We're ISO 9001 certified, which means that our production facility is certified to an international standard, audited every year by the ISO bodies that measure and check how we're doing to make sure we're proper practice as far as quality, as far as process, as far as engineering. Everything is watched by the ISO review board. After that, we have a second ISO certification, which is 14001, which is the environmental certification, which basically is very similar to the quality one, but entirely from an environmental point of view. Make sure there's no oil spill, make sure that we're recycling, make sure that any of the aspects that could make us best practice as far as environmental regulations go. ICCES is a US certification, very important which basically gives you the clout to go to a city inspector and say, yeah, we're certified to install in the US. CWB, Canadian Welding Bureau, AWS, so American Welding Society. We have UKCA, which is actually very similar to ISO 9001, but it's specific to the United Kingdom. We have CE, which again is similar to ISO 9001, but it's for mainland Europe. ACQ and CA are certifications relative to us interacting with other products. So example, we have a steel galvanized pile, and we're going to connect that to a treated wood structure. Well, ACQ basically determines, what are the chemical interactions between those items to make sure that, your pile is not going to destroy the wood or vice versa. So we make sure that when we connect to something, we're not creating chemical imbalances that could cause corrosion. So it's a little complicated to explain, but we'll go through that in training. CCMC, very important. It's our Canadian Construction Material Commission. They measure and watch the industry to make sure that everyone is conforming to the regulations. across the country for Canada, similar to what we have for ICCDS in the US. All right. So start your journey is, after your training, you're going into business. This is where the fun starts. You're going to be speaking to us literally every single day. Whether it's an engineer because you need sort of mathematics behind something you're going to do, whether it's customer service to sort of figure out what the right inventory levels are to make sure you're not, burning up too much cash and sitting on inventory versus having enough inventory for your customers and so on and so forth. There are different ways to become a franchisee, all very similar, but with a little nuance between each one of them. The first one is converting your business. So you have a business, it's doing well, good, bad, doesn't matter, and you want to convert it from your current product line, or let's say, for example, simple example is you're in construction and you're doing roofing, but there's too much competition in that sector. So you want to get into a more profitable sector. You can convert that, or you've got a company that's not related to construction, and you want to convert it to something that's going to be profitable, and so on and so forth. Cross-selling opportunity businesses. I'm in an industry where I buy the franchise and I add it on to my current model because my customers can actually take advantage of this product as is. So let's say you're doing, your customers might be decking companies. So let's say, for example, you're selling wood boards, and all of a sudden you realize, well, now I can sell piles to the same guys who are building decking. That's cross-selling opportunity franchise. So become a franchisee is the standard, most common model where people go in, they don't have another business, they're not converting anything, and they want to start from a zero start. And we're very good at that, by the way, because that's almost 90% of the franchisees are like that. So that's basically, I buy a franchise, I know nothing about the industry, we train you up, we go through all the process to make sure that you're successful. In different industries have different, obviously, costs and so on and so forth. When you buy a McDonald's, you might be spending $1 million to get that thing set up because of all the equipment and so on and so forth. For GoliathTech, our franchise fee is $49,500. The total investment range, which is basically how much am I going to have to spend as a whole, excavator, equipment, staffing, and all the stuff that I have to invest to get my franchise running, is between 100 and 241K is our mathematics. It's in our franchise disclosure document. But that's, you can do it at 100,000. Some people like to go in with a bigger structure, go a little further, and they might go up to 240-ish. Typically, I would say most people get in for around 100 to 150, a typical amount. Zero royalty fee. We do not charge royalties. It's not even in our model. We have a 6% of product purchases. What is that? Okay, so every franchisee pays into a marketing pool. This is not a royalty. This is, you buy $100 of product and you pay another 6%. So another $6 goes into a pot. This pot is then used, it's not money we keep, it's then used to put and do efforts of marketing back in your territories. So we take this global fund, which is received from all the franchisees, and we use it for marketing, for Google ads, for YouTube videos, for anything that will pull or push business towards the franchisee. So it's a very important actually part of becoming a franchisee. People often ask, why do I want to be a franchisee? And one of the main reasons is because of the marketing power of a franchise chain. Franchise chain, typically, even when markets go really poor, it's the franchise chains that always withstand and hold over time. They're not. It's not franchise chains that are closing down when economies crash. It's the inverse. It's the smaller guys that don't have the marketing funds, and you try to have a local smaller business without this big infrastructure. Those are the ones that are more prone to get into danger when economies go bad, as we're talking about right now.
So I just want to add something. If you're looking at becoming a franchisee and you're considering all your risks, one thing to consider if we're looking at the 100 to 241 total investment range. Now, of that investment, it's going to be an excavator, a pickup, and a trailer. So an excavator, skid steer, pickup, and a trailer. Now, something in comparison, for instance, if you're looking at a McDonald's or a Wendy's or a franchise like that, you have to buy very specific equipment. For instance, you have to buy a McDonald's hamburger oven, for instance. Now, if you're looking at it from a risk aspect, if things change, if things don't go well, if something really happens, you are literally stuck with that oven. You can only sell it to another McDonald's franchisee. For instance, again, if we're looking at it as simply from a risk aspect, when you buy an excavator, a pickup, and a trailer, I mean, they're easily sold to basically anyone who needs, a skid steer, excavator, a pickup, and a trailer. The risk is very low that you're going to be stuck with something, and you're going to lose 50% of your investment because, again, as from a risk aspect only, we can always sell those items. The only thing that you purchase from us specifically for helical piles is the hydraulic drive. That's the only thing that it is very specific to our industry that you would be not at risk because but it's much lower risk as opposed to a $100,000 oven. You'll be with a $6,000 to $7,000 hydraulic drive.
All the rest is pretty much
Exactly.
standard industry standard equipment that you get. If
In the construction excavation industry.
Okay, so we're going to go to the question and answers. I'm sure you guys have some interesting questions that we'd love to hear. And look over on the other screen here because we got to make sure. Okay, so does anybody have any questions at this point about the GoliathTech opportunity? Project. I live in an area that is winter most of the year. Can helical piles be installed in the snow?
So the short answer is yes. If, for instance, you're in an area where the snow has not been disturbed, you can generally remove the snow and install that pile right without any prep at all. You can install that pile because the snow acts as an insulator. If, however, you're installing in an area where have very little snow or the snow has been removed, so the frost was able to get into the ground and really make the first 10 inches to 1 foot of soil really hard. It's literally hard as ice that you cannot generally install a helical pile. So we have a solution. We have a ground heater solution. So you literally drill a pilot hole, you drop our ground heater in. It takes about 20 minutes and that heats the ground enough to install the pile as you would in the summertime.
Another question here is, could you please describe in more detail what a helical pile is? What is it made of and how long do they last?
So a helical pile is, again, a large screw that we screw into the ground. So there's 3 main parts of a helical pile. We have the shaft, we have the helix or the load-bearing plate, and we have the attachment head. The attachment head, of course, attaches the pile to whatever structure we're using. So all our piles, all our steel is 60 KSI steel. And what was the other one?
How long do they last?
One other thing is a helical pile is, so we have many different sizes and models dependent completely on the soil type and the structure we're going on top of the pile. So we have some very small piles for instance, for building on a deck or a smaller home addition. We have very large piles, for instance, for a bridge, a very large industrial building, that sort of thing. How long do they last? So our warranty is 30 years on the galvanization protection. So where do we get that number from? So we've had our piles tested by the Galvanization Association of America, and in the worst possible case scenario soil, they last 30 years. Now that means the pile has 100% of its load-bearing capacity after 30 years. Now you're saying, oh, that doesn't seem like enough if I'm doing a hospital or a prison or something that has to have a 99-year service life, for instance. So we can go in, we can do a soil sample, and we can adjust that warranty accordingly. And there's other things we can do. Different methods of galvanization. We can actually use a much thicker steel than necessary to make sure it lasts as long as the project is destined.
Can someone buy helical piles from you directly? Definitely not. I mean, we only sell through our franchise chain. Imagine if Wendy's started selling their cheeseburgers at another, local burger shop. That would sort of destroy the whole brand of Wendy's. So definitely not. You can only the end users can only purchase directly from us. Sorry, the end users can only purchase directly from our franchisees, the GoliathTech franchisees. What is the main target market for your products? Lightweight structures, decks, patios, residential applications, commercial. Who will be my main client as a franchisee? Okay, so we specialize in light and slightly medium weight construction. So structures that are from 0 to 3 stories in height. Like a 3-story building, a 3-story home. But most of the volume actually comes in the lightest sector. So decks, patios, gazebos, street signs, car chargers, light structures like that. Very high volume as far as unit goes sector. So it's a light category, but the volume is very high. For residential use, are you mainly selling to contractors who use for their projects or for homeowners? In the residential sector, our franchisees will do work for individual homeowners, but that's not the main business. The main business is you're looking for, example, a decking contractor who's doing 100 decking jobs a year. And once you get him on board, well, he's calling you every 2 weeks to do another job. And you get, and then the next one might be, a company that does, home extensions. And they're going to call you in. It could be pool companies, and because we do a lot of pools, because pools tend to crack when the ground is bad. You get poor soft soils. So we get pool companies as a repeat business. So your basic business is trying to get repeat business customers, but you will do work for some homeowners directly as well. But that's not the main business. Can you put a solar panel on a helical pile? Definitely. It's actually one of the most common ways. I mean, there's 2 typical ways solar panels are mounted. One is roofing. So you're not going to put a helical pile through your roof on your house. So we don't do anything to do with roofing. But for anything that's ground mount, where you have solar panels that are on the ground, whether it's a solar field, whether it's a small backyard setup to power your home, very, very common use case for helical piles is supporting solar panels.
And we actually already have an attachment point or a head to use with the Schletter, the Snap and Rack, the Sunmoto, the Iron Ridge, and a bunch of other racking systems. So there's no extra thing to design. You install the helical pile, you install our head specific for that racking system, and they literally bolt together. It's as simple as that.
One of our questions here is, are they rated for residential foundation stabilization? Definitely. It's a huge use case for us. One of our bread and butter applications, where you have a home that was built whatever amount of years ago, let's example 50 years ago. It's built on clay or soft soil. The home has sunk and the foundation needs to be stabilized and pulled back up to its original position or stabilized from sinking anymore. And we use what's called underpinning brackets. So the helical pile gets screwed in the ground. You then have these brackets that go all around the foundation's walls, and we actually restabilize foundations. Very common use case. It's actually really good business for our franchisees. They make each one of these jobs can be very, very profitable. So excellent use case. Good question. You have stamped specification sheets for the US or just for Canada? So everywhere we operate, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Canada, whether it's in the US, anywhere, we always have specification sheets specific to not only the country, but actually the states that we work in. So if you're in Minnesota, as an example, well, we'll have specific specification sheets for Minnesota. We might have one for Quebec, and then we might have one for the UK and England, which is one for the UK is not done provincially, but so depending on the country. But definitely we have specifications specific to at the federal level, as well as at the state level, or the provincial level, and the federal level, so as well.
Actually, so I'll just take that point just a little farther. So it happens all the time that even though, like Julian just said, the federal and the state level is not a problem, sometimes the smaller municipalities have a spec, a given requirement for helical piles. It's never a problem for us to help the franchisee meet that requirement. It's never a problem. We just need to know what it is. Sometimes it's as simple as, for instance, the city inspector has to be on site to watch the helical pile be installed. Now, almost always these requirements come from kind of lack of knowledge, if you will, from the helical pile, how it works, the correlation between installation torque and capacity. But again, it's never a problem for us to meet those requirements. We just need to know what they are.
That's so far the last question. Does anybody else have any questions versus the GoliathTech opportunity? Seems like, okay, if that's the last question, I suppose, then I'll thank you all for taking the time to come and listen to our webinar and look into the GoliathTech opportunity. We'd really like to hear from you, and we'd love to, do business with you and hopefully have you as a franchisee would be obviously the perfect result. Please do keep in touch with us. Go to our website, sign up to meet with our franchise sales reps, and let's put it together.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining.